Why am I seeing $85 for a product that I put into my cart 2 days ago or a day ago that was selling for $50? That is because of the de-minimis exemption. Now, what exactly is a de-minimis exemption? The de-minimis exemption is a duty-free circumstance that the customs or the US government has created for its citizens to import products that are below $800 duty-free. In most cases, even the amount of paperwork that you have to do for those products are very limited. Now, so it was meant to reduce the stress and the cumbersomeness that come with importing low-value products. So the United States of America decides to create an exemption called the de-minimis exemption. And it's been wonderful. The citizens have always benefited from that exemption because they can buy products out of the country and bring them into the States customs duty free. Now, that exemption has become a loophole, and e-commerce platforms like Temu and Shein has decided to explore that loophole and bring down the true value of their products to make it ultra cheap so that the customers based in the US can look them as an alternative and buy more of those products under $800 and bring them into the States. And the amount of shopping or shipments of these products coming into America increased from $140 million in 2015 to $1.3 billion in 2024. So that's a huge amount of importation done into a country that, if you look at it, if you can have half of that or more than 50% of that amount of money internally, it will benefit the country. So now the de-minimis exemption is being suspended. One would just say that maybe it's because of the exploitation of that loophole by retailers outside the US, because this is not about countries in the Far East like China, Hong Kong, or because of e-commerce platforms like Temu or Shein. No, literally all retailers outside the US, in North America, far off in Europe, kept on exploiting that loophole. And so it has led to the lack of patronage for retailers within the country. But is that the reason why the president decided to, in July last month, suspend the de-minimis exemption? That's not all the reason why he did that. One of the major reasons why President Trump suspended the exemption is because of security concerns. Every exemption has benefits for the businesses. When lawmakers sit down to create an exemption in their customs, or when officials sit down to create an exemption, it is because they're looking towards the business side of it. How is it going to alleviate the stress on our citizens? How is it going to benefit our economy? But as always, people want to exploit that same loophole. And in this case, the president and the White House have talked a lot about the importation of illegal substances and contrabands. And these smugglers do is that they put these packages, these illicit drugs, in small packages. And because these small packages have no duties and have little paperwork involved in them, so little paperwork means that they'll have little scrutiny involved in them. So it has become a means of smuggling items or smuggling illegal substances into the US or bringing in contrabands into the US. So that is like 60% of the reason why President Trump decided to suspend that exemption entirely. And that exemption, sadly, has affected businesses. So when some people use an exemption for bad motives, it tends to rob the whole system, as always. We've come to see that on one of my previous episodes in customs in Australia. Now, the second reason was from the lawmakers. Now, lawmakers are in place to provide opportunities for the citizens that are voting for them. So the de-minimis exemption was excellent. But imagine having half of $1.3 billion coming in from your own economy rather than being exported. It would mean that businesses will grow, employment will also grow. So that was the angle the lawmakers had to talk about, that exemption is no longer being favorable to our own retailers in the country, that the consumers opting to buying from outside more than they should be buying from within the country and from the retailers. And so the lawmakers concerned and the security concerned all built up into the suspension of the exemption by the president last month, which will take effect this month on the 29th of August 2025. Now, what happens next after the exemption is suspended? What it means is that the articles and the products that usually qualify for the de-minimis exemption would now have to face duty or tariffs. If you're buying a product far away outside the US, just know that the structure of that tariff has changed. Right now, goods can now face up to 30% ad valorem or fixed fees of $25 to $50 per item. So when you get an item that is not from the US, that should be bought from the US, and usually qualify for the exemption, now there will be no exemption. Now, you could either choose to pay 30% of the value of that goods as duty charges, or you pay $25 to $50 per item. So you really would have to want to buy such an item to pay that amount of money, to pay that 30% of the value of the item, or to pay $25 to $50 per item in a huge bulk of item you're buying from outside the US. So what is the implication of this in the e-commerce ecosystem? Oh, like always, every policy has winners and losers. And in this situation, the winners here is Amazon and all other retailers, whether online retailers or walk-in store retailers that you have in the US, because they've seen a spike in patronage, they've seen a spike in user activities. It has benefited them a lot because now users in the US prefer to buy items from the US, mainly when you compare the fact that the items are either of same price or a bit lesser in cost, a bit lesser in the amount of days it will take to deliver. Now, the losers of that policy happens to be the e-commerce giants from China, talking about Temu, Shein, and literally every retailer outside the US, North America, Europe, Africa. So these are retailers that have lost a chunk of their businesses so far. Temu and Shein, for instance, have seen a drop in downloads, 77% drop in app downloads, and 44 to 50% drop in user activities. That's a lot of money you're literally losing, because the more the downloads means people are going to use it either now or later. And if people don't access your platforms, go to your platforms, see items, see what you have on your platforms, there's a lesser chance that they may patronize what you have. The pendulum that swung towards the US has created opportunities, has created profits for the e-commerce ecosystem in the US. But the pendulum that left the e-commerce ecosystem outside the US has created a huge loss for them outside. So it's not been a favorable season currently for retailers outside the US. And we've seen reactions. Truly, there's been reactions from Canada, reactions from Europe, reactions from Australia, reactions from even the Far East. People trying not to ship anymore to the US. And that's the thing about policies. When a policy is meant for one industry, sometimes it rubs on another industry or sector that is related to it. And in this case, it's the finance industry. But how? You see, when you buy things out of your border, you pay for it and you use a cross-border payment platform. And the more transactions across its border, the more payments cross-border platforms. But if that amount of patronage or activities drop, it will surely affect payment platforms. And that is what has happened. The drop from Americans trying to buy items outside America has led to a drop in activities on the usage of payment platforms. One policy can take a lot of hits on several industries. So, what can I as a shopper or as a retailer do? As a shopper, we have to start making considerations. We have to make adjustments in our shopping habits if I come to realize that buying an item in America will be cheaper or maybe of the same price, but will take lesser period of time, I would have to make an adjustment in my shopping habit. Maybe I don't have to buy from outside America after all and go on paying $25 to $50 some extra on the item, or a 30% of the value of the item as duty charges. Or with what Temu is doing right now, so they're making a readjustment in their business model. They're looking at, rather than having these customers buy all the way cross-border and pay this amount of money on duties, we can have our warehouses in America. That will reduce the costs of importation for our customers so that we can also be competitive, because Temu is a competitor with Amazon. So if Temu have warehouses, then maybe we can reconsider. As a shopper, I was looking at Temu. I'll now start looking at, can I get this item here in America? How many days away would it take me to get the item? So if it's easier or cheaper for you to get it in Temu's warehouses in America, then you just go right ahead. But if it's cheaper to buy from other retail shops, maybe small retail shops, maybe from Amazon or from other online stores that are not as popular as Amazon, then we go ahead to buy from there. So what we have to do right now as shoppers is to start exploring or shopping literally in other platforms, so we don't end up spending so much money on little item. We have to find a way to make adjustments. Therefore, retailers who has always benefited from this de-minimis exemption, it is now time to reevaluate your business model as well, because you want to keep doing business, but you also want to be mindful on how you shift the cost from your business to the consumer. Look at what's happening with Temu. When Temu tried to shift the cost from its business to the consumers, it didn't pay off. It backfired. So much so that 77% reduction in downloads has occurred in just a few weeks. And so rather than trying to shift the costs from your business to the consumer, one has to consider if the consumer have an alternative. Because if your consumer have an alternative where they can get it better, faster, and cheaper, then there is a higher chance that you may lose a percentage, if not all your consumers. And if you try to take that cost and put it on your own business, you would also end up losing money, losing profit, and even losing employees in the process, because if you cannot make more profit, you may have to lay off staff. So what retailers should do in this context is to also go back into the market and do market research and make analysis and see where they can readjust their shopping with suppliers as well. So do I have to buy from Canada, from Mexico, based on the trade agreements between the three countries? Do I have to buy from the US because it's faster? But if I have to buy from Far East or from Europe, what are the factors I have to put in place? If it comes back into the country, what is the duty charges on those products? And if I pay those duty charges as a whole bulk, what are the consequences downline in my business? So there are a lot of factors that retailers need to consider before they continue importing items into the US. So if we can make this adjustment, hopefully things are going to get better, because nobody wants to lose money. And we can see the adjustments being done in the ecosystem currently. It's quite true right now that Amazon is making the most out of it. But how long is it going to be? How is it going to, in the long run, affect retailers outside the US? How is it going to affect the relationship with various countries in the long run? We do not know. But what we do know is that currently, if you do import an item that used to be under the de-minimis exemption into the US, you are going to pay 30% of that value as duty charges, or $25 to $50 per item in that box or in that total collection. So we do not want to be spending much money on an item we can get as an alternative within the state. So we have to reconsider. So that's what we have this week. The need for us to tilt with the ecosystem that is changing currently. And if we do have to go Far East, how do we do it? And we've seen Temu making a shift in their business model. Small retail businesses should also make the shift. So that's all for this week's episode on Tales of Logistics. Keep promoting businesses, keep reevaluating your businesses, and see you in our next episode.